What's up, guys? Steven Spikes here, and today I'm going to be talking about one of, I'd say, the most beautiful metal songs that I've ever heard. It's When Darkness Falls by Killswitch Engage. That's coming up right now here on the Spike Signal. So today we're going to be discussing a really sick song off of End of Heartache. I have done my best to try to draw valid interpretations from the sheet music shown in the song itself. However, there's a lot of non-diatonic stuff happening throughout very large chunks of it. So some of this is certainly open to interpretation, and there might be better ways to check it out. I'm just going to show you guys how I figured it. So let's go ahead and get on over to it. If you look here, you'll see that we are in the key of C minor. They are playing dropped C guitars. Along with that, we have lots of accidentals going on. So instead of what I typically do of interpreting a measure or so as a chord form, as an implied chord form, what I've done instead is just noted every single interval, mostly every interval. For example, right here in the bass line, I've noted how the interval relates to C minor, because as we see later on in the pre-chorus and the chorus, the song primarily is in C minor, so I'm just going to look at everything from that vantage point. We have some threes, some ones right here. The one, of course, is a C note itself. The three, in this case, is a major third away from the C note. So that's kind of how to interpret these. When you have situations such as this, where you have two numbers sandwiched together like that with a comma in between, that just means that a chord's being played, and both of these numbers, respectively, are the individual notes within the chord's distance from C minor, from the C note, the one of C minor. So let's go ahead and get into it a little bit. Just want to say a few things before I play it. Start off the song with a sort of slide down on the lowest string. Very, very powerful and punchy way to start it. They love starting songs this way. End of Heartache, As Daylight Dies. There's peppered with songs that start out this way. And it's a really good thing to do to welcome in the intensity of this song. So let's go ahead and play just the first passage before the screaming itself starts. As you can see, the song sounds absolutely massive. It even sounds like powerful over Guitar Pro, which is pretty impressive. And what they're doing in order to get those crushing riffs is relying on a couple tools. So first of all, a lot of these notes, the chords themselves, are actually perfect fourth chords, all right? So you can see distances or so of a fourth away instead of raw power chords, which lend a little bit to intensity. It catches your ear a little bit off guard. But aside from that, obvious to you, probably and obvious to me, we have a ton of accidental used all over the place. That being the reason why I didn't straight up interpret chord forms, because there's chromaticism, as we can see here. There's all kinds of things going on in order to give the song a very, very powerful punch and almost unhinged and chaotic, and some might say psychotic feel to it, as well as a higher line going up over top with the lead guitar, kind of making things a little more interesting too. I'm going to play it again. Let's pay attention to that. So yeah, we have a lead line going over there. Now I want to get really micro level for just a second in one particular area. If we look at the rhythm guitar right here, so we can see, and referring to the intervals up top again, we can see in relation to C minor, they're playing a chord that draws on a note a major third away from C minor, as well as a major six away. They then play an actual C minor, the pedal tone right here, that's the 0, that's the C. And then what do? They play chromatically down a chord that is just basically a half step on both notes of the chord down right here compared to the first chord they played. So they play a major 3 and a major 6 in one chord, and a minor 3 and a minor 6, or a flat 3 and a flat 6 in the very next chord. these kinds of movements show up repeatedly and once again kind of emphasize the craziness of what's going on here. On top of that, not only do you have intensity and insanity created off of this movement right here within the rhythm guitars, you also have it created in the lead line right here, because as we can see, these chords are actually playing a C and an E respectively. And underneath that, what do you have? Well, in this section, you have a frickin' C major, or rather a major third, I should say. Tons of insanity. That juxtaposition really, really brings out the craziness and allows it to smack hard. And just in case you were interested, underneath that, the bass line, if we were going to interpret chords, this would be the place to do it. The bass line is playing a major third itself. So just a lot of insanity. The chromaticism, the non-diatonic stuff is kind of mirrored here in the bass. So we got lots and lots of interesting, crazy stuff going on here. It's pretty cool and everything like that. So let's go ahead and keep listening to it. One more thing I wanted to say before we go on actually is, as anyone who's listened to the song can say, the very, very first measure, or second measure in this case rather, has Howard and Adam D both like screaming their balls off, like very, very intense, you know. I'm thinking maybe there's like double tracks of both of them or one of them or something. It gives you an all-out assault that absolutely smacks you. And if you're not into metal, it's one of those things that can really turn you off from it. It's that intense and all that. But yeah, lots of stuff going in here to make it sound intense. So I'm going to play a few measures in. You have this tremolo line right here, and at the same time, now there's again lots of different ways to look at this. I look at this measure right here, and again I'm going to play it just from the start one more time so you can hear it. I would say that that actually is somewhat of a momentary, and I say somewhat, very carefully, is somewhat of a modulation to C Phrygian. And I say that because we have the flat second right here. So, and maybe I shouldn't say like an actual modulation like it's going down, but rather they are drawing from a flat second right here, hence why we have 4 flats and everything, because within that we have C Phrygian. So just kind of borrowing a note from another scale, from another C scale, it's C Phrygian, in order to anti-up the intensity. So really, really cool stuff right there. Let's go ahead and keep on listening to it overall. Okay, so we have the lead line, shall we call it, right here, playing up, and totally lost place right here. The lead line sort of ascending up, playing some different things there now in respect to C minor, playing a note, a flat 5, a flat 5th away from C minor. So once again, building that intensity, almost a very Locrian sounding thing, a very C Locrian sounding thing, because in C Locrian you'd have a flat 5 opposed to a natural 5. Again, not saying it's in C Locrian, just sort of borrowing, if you would potentially, we could say, from the C Locrian scale. And we move on from here into the next sort of ascension of the lead line. We then continue with the flat 5 and now add back a major 6. So once again, something non-diatonic to the key of C minor. That major 6 is not part of C minor, it'd be part of C Dorian, or, C major if you would, or Lydian. But we could look at it more kind of in a standpoint of adding a Dorian note. That's the flat, or the major 6. It's the kind of unique note there. But that's all just very, very speculative. I mean, who's to say when it comes to something like this? Now, what I wanted to get into here next was just talk momentarily about the key change. So we have a key change right here. We're in 4/4 all up to here, except for one measure back, and we have a key change. And we actually did before as well, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, right over here, and yes, this was in 3/4 as well. The key change is just another tool in your arsenal to make things sound more chaotic. You know, in this case, I would argue that's what it's used for. Even though there was a key change before for one measure, most of your measures here are in 4/4. So along with the chromaticism, along with the non-diatonic notes, along with the clashing of tones to make things sound very dissonant, Killswitch also utilizes a key change in order to really catch you off guard, trick your ear and trick you into thinking that what you're listening to is just very, once again, chaotic, swirly, intense, almost psychotic in a manner. And a key change is another way to do that, especially when within that key change you're playing notes that aren't exactly diatonic to the presumably implied scale underneath. You're moving from a 3 to a flat 3 to a flat 7 with on the bass line, with some chords doing some rather intense things as well. So just all tools to make things sound crazy. What has gone on, the music theory up to this point, has all been used in service of really making things sound insane. And we're not even yet to the verse, but let's go ahead and jump on over to the verse. I'm going to zoom out some so we can get a mostly clear picture of what's going on here, and we're going to go. Okay, so we're going to stop right there after the first part of the verse. Now, one thing I wanted to say, obviously not on here, is Howard Jones's screaming, okay? Is screaming in this passage, you know, and like I've listened to this song a shit ton, but like listening to it recently in preparation for this video, really I appreciated the variety of pitches. I don't know if pitches is the best word for it, but I'm going to say pitches that his screamed vocals are doing. He's going very high, kind of like lower and midline, and I'm not necessarily talking about frequencies, by the way. I'm just talking about in terms of what it sounds like in a sort of subjective sense. Perhaps he is kind of tapping into some frequency stuff to do that, but yeah. One way or the other, it's very good vocal line, very interesting. It's not like a flat, consistent screamed sound. It is dynamic, and it's really cool. So over this, he's doing a lot of interesting pitches. The guitars are essentially what we saw before in the intro. Okay. So to get right here, and I should point out, this episode will be a little less intense on what goes on in terms of harmony, but there are lots and lots of other tricks here used that are kind of a little bit unique to this song compared to other songs we've talked about in the past and everything. So let's go ahead and get into that. We have, once again, another key change. We then have what I just call a transition section, and that's this part right here. It's these two measures. They kind of break from form of the standard 8 or 16 measure lines you hear in most songs, and that stacked with the fact that everything cuts off in this moment except for a drum hit shown right here and a guitar line, the guitar part right here on one side, gives you a really once again just kind of chaotic, off kilter, tripping you up kind of sound that really adds to the overall bashing the song gives you right up front. So let's go ahead and play it a little bit back. Let's go ahead and move on past the transition. A rest for 2/4. We're back into the 4/4. The drums change up as well as the vocals to give some variety. Got a pinch drum on it. Now that part that we're hearing right there, and once again, you're not going to really be able to hear this clearly in Guitar Pro, but what goes on there in the actual track is they'll have the line going, but they also add in one side, panned hard in one direction, they have this kind of droning, palm-muted guitar that's just playing C over and over again, and we can see that right here, and it continues on. You see it while this guitar rests right here, you see it droning right here in these sections. And again, that's a little element you can use, something very simple, very conceptually simple and very easy to execute. That's an important element you can utilize to keep your listener engaged, because in the entire production, something rather massive has changed. You know, now you have, like, along with the rest for most of the guitar, you have this little droning thing in one side, and it actually sounds pretty powerful on the track, that being said, but it continues on, and it's different, and it's cool. The drums and everything associated with them also kind of chills out. This is the drum line right here. Basically, it jumped all the way up there. Very simple, almost kind of like breakdown-ish, you know what I'm saying? But, like, it's only the verse. So, yeah, lots of good techniques to utilize here to keep a song consistent yet intricate at the same time. So let's go ahead and zoom on out of here. We're going to continue on right now. Okay, so we have something really cool here. First of all, heard a little bit of a off-key thing right there. This tab might not be totally accurate, of course. First of all, sliding into the verse, and I say sliding because, as with many songs and riffs that Killswitch Engage has, they utilize sliding all throughout it in order to just kind of give a quick transition that you barely hear. They use that here into the chorus. So just want to be known sliding something you do that's cool into the chorus. But then we get into the actual chorus where we have some cool stuff going on here. So I'm going to play it all the way through. Okay, so overall, not as complicated as some things you might figure that you hear in a metal song, but there's still lots of great sort of nuggets, if you would, of music theory to draw from this, so let's go ahead and get right to it. First of all, we see a consistent return to a 3/4 time signature right here. The pre-chorus is entirely in 3/4, which was really cool to me when I heard it, because I didn't know that. Like, I would have been able to figure it out. Like, and you can figure it out pretty easy if you clap along to it, but I never did that for the song. I never sat, like, in my car driving clapping along to it. So when I actually did it, I was like, oh shit, that is in 3/4. All right, cool, you know? So changes to 3/4 all throughout it. So cool, kind of unique thing there. Along with that, I want to first talk about the chord movements and the harmonies implied here, as I typically do. Then we're going to get into some of the more kind of unique stuff right here. So I'm going to go ahead and get in on real close to the guitars right here. And this is the bass up here. Okay. So, first of all, we have a C minor chord implied. We're finally going to see, you know, the pre-chorus as well as the actual chorus is what makes, to me, this song valid to be interpreted in C minor, at least best as one can. So, we have C minor going here to the A flat, to the B flat, to the F minor. So, along with that, now, we have essentially a movement in the lead line as the C minor chords are played and C minor notes are played, where we slide up from the 2 of C minor to the flat 3. Then we have some palm muted notes right here, and just kind of repeat that over and over again. So you literally have this constant pulling your hands up the strings up to the flat 3. You have a constant pull to the flat 3 of C minor, while these chords down here continue just playing C minor in and of themselves. So moving on. We go to the A flat, which is once again kind of the 1 to the flat 6 progression, right? We go there. Now this time, and this actually right here should be a 4, but it's now sliding up from a 4 to a 5. So once again, most of these octave chords are playing a note, a chord tone of what's being played underneath, which in this case is an A flat. It's a flat 6. So we go on from there to the flat 7, so kind of the 1, flat 6, flat 7 progression. We're at the B flat now. Once again, now kind of going down, if you would. Sliding down now from what would be the 4 to the major third to the 3. And then going to the F minor, which is the 4, which I've actually, like, after looking at these songs for a while, I've seen several instances. I think Soilwork did it too, where they actually moved from a flat 7 to a 4. So that's a cool little thing right there. I haven't tried that much in music alright, but I'm gonna start using it because it sounds really good when bands I like do it. So the F minor. And now the octave chord is actually sliding from a non-chord tone, which is the 6, to not exactly the triad tone, which is a flat 7, sliding to the flat 7. And really kind of giving it that Killswitch Engage sound, you know what I'm saying? Killswitch, they utilize a lot of flat 7s. They utilize a lot of second or major seconds as well. And it really, I feel, is one of the driving forces of their sound. Along with some of their chromatic and intense stuff, as we saw before, they utilize that a lot too. So let's go ahead and get into the next section of the chorus, or pre-chorus rather, right now. Moving into the pre-chorus right now, the second part of the pre-chorus, if you would, I'm gonna go ahead and play it, and then we're gonna start observing some pretty interesting and intricate things right here, in a manner of speaking. Okay, so again, any weirdness you hear is just weirdness in the tab itself, not in the actual song. But there's actually a lot here to talk about, which is pretty cool. So at this point, Killswitch dispenses with the lowest 3-string chords they were playing prior, and now strictly does octave chords across both guitars. Once again, a very, very Killswitch Engage sounding type thing. And what they're doing here is, once again, if we're viewing these chords the same, C minor to A flat to B flat to F minor, which we are because that's what the bass line is doing, and we can draw some interpretations as such from it. So going into the guitar that's shown lower here on the staff, we have it doing, and we're going to get into Howard's voice in just a little bit here, but we have it doing some movements from the 2nd to the 3. So kind of, if I'm not mistaken, all across the board, the same thing as last time. In the A, we're going from the 4 to the 5 again. In the B, we're going down from the 4 to the 3. And then in the F, we're going from the flat 7 to the 5. That's a little bit different right there. But, you kind of see what I'm saying. Once again, the one guitar, the sort of lower guitar, if you would, is following closely the chord tones to what it would be implied by what the bass is doing. Let's go up to the next guitar now. What this guitar is doing in these two measures right here, where a C is being implied, they are playing thirds. So very, very typical, very, very like often seen done thing right here. Still sounds great, still sounds awesome. Moving on to the A flat, they're doing something a little bit different now. So what they're doing with the A flat, once again, the lower rhythm guitar, if you want to call this a rhythm guitar, is going from a 4 to a 5 over and over again. The higher rhythm guitar is going from a 7 to a 2. So it's actually, instead of moving up 2 and playing thirds, it's actually playing fourths. So that's pretty tight, that's pretty cool, that's pretty different. And let's take a listen to it to see if we can kind of hear how it sounds differently. To me, when I hear that, I hear a lot more of a kind of, I don't want to say intensity because I use that word a lot, but there's a little bit more of an urgency to the harmony that I feel. And there's obviously other things going on there to create that, but if I can just do my best to focus on that higher line, I'd say it gives a lot of urgency. So that's a useful tactic, if you're looking to do some octave chord stuff, but you want to make it sound a little bit more urgent, a little bit more exciting, and a little less kind of just, going from third to third to third over and over again. Try that. A very, very useful technique. So let's go ahead and continue on. And it looks like while we are on the A, or rather the B, we return to thirds. We have a 4 to a 6 and a 3 to a 5. They're both following more or less same pattern. We'll talk about the movement in a second, though. And when the F minor comes around, we once again go to, actually, we do some strange stuff again. We have what is essentially a 1 being played right here, an F, so to speak, being played right here in the higher guitar line, and a flat 7 being played here in the lower guitar line. So, and it's just for a moment, it's just for an 8th note, but it is a very interesting harmony. We then have a 2 being played here, bringing in some of those 2s, as well as a 5 of F minor here, which is a chord tone. So again, utilizing some sevenths, some flat sevenths, utilizing some twos, some really, really cool stuff there to keep it interesting. Now, I want to talk about the actual movements that the guitars are doing and what they'd be called here as well. Now, a moment ago, and I'm going to go back here earlier to the chorus, Killswitch was doing something called oblique motion in this section, and that's the section, it's the first part of the pre-chorus. Where they're playing the lower chords on the 3 lowest strings and staying constant while the rhythm guitar is moving, or the lead guitar rather, the octave guitar is moving a little bit. That's called oblique motion. When you have one line doing something stationary and another line moving, and granted it's not moving very much, it's moving like one note then staying at that note, but it's still moving a little bit. That's called oblique motion. So that's a technique you can utilize to break things out a little bit and make it sound good. And they're doing some other stuff with a similar yet different terminology down here in the second part of the pre-chorus. Let's go ahead and get into that real quick. And this is where it gets kind of cool. I'm going to zoom in a touch here so we can try to see my notes as well as the guitars and the bass. So first of all, and I'm just going to be talking about the 2 guitar lines respective to each other. If you wanted to add the bass in there, you could classify this as like a mix of oblique motion and other things. I'm just going to talk about the 2 guitar lines, the 2 octave guitar lines being played here. So let's look at the first 2 bars right here. Okay, so right there, they're doing what's called parallel motion, which is where you move in the same direction at the same interval. So if we get in real quick here and real close here, we'll see that each guitar is ascending by 1 interval. Parallel motion, following very closely. So let's go ahead and get to the next section. We're going to get to the A flat right here. So in this section right here, they're doing what's called similar motion, and that's where it's the same direction but a different interval, and we can see that right here. So the lower guitar line here is ascending 1 interval. The higher guitar line right here is ascending up a third. And by 1 interval, I mean it's ascending up a single interval. This guitar right here is going up a third, essentially. 1 note away to 2 notes away, depending on how you want to look at it. You can see it right here. But that's called similar motion. Same direction, but different interval. So let's go ahead and get to the next part right here, and that's for the B flat. Okay, and again, that sounds kind of weird on the tab, but... Okay, what's going on here is parallel motion. Once again, same direction, same interval rather, same direction, same interval. We're going downwards in both cases, 1 interval. We're going to the second of the preceding interval, if you would, right there as shown. And I'm only talking about the octave chords. Once again, we have these pedal notes right here, not talking about those, just applying this to a standpoint of the octave chords. Might not be the most professional way of applying these concepts, but I think it is useful in the context of a metal song. And then we're going to move on to the F minor, which is showing something called contrary motion. Okay, so in here, contrary motion is same direction, but a different interval. Or actually, rather, a different direction and a different interval. My mistake. So we have 1 chord, or 1 line, rather, ascending 1, up 1, going up 1 note right here. We have the other line descending, going to a third, essentially. That gives you contrary motion. Try not to even confuse myself here. That's when you have a different direction and a different interval. Strict contrary motion is when you have the same intervals, if I'm not mistaken. You might want to double check that. But that's another technique you can utilize in a situation in order to make things sound different. And I have to say, I feel like these techniques are really utilized like really well within songs like this, because when you can't even tell that they're using a certain technique, like when it doesn't jump out at you like, whoa, what are they doing right there? I feel like that's something where it was really used well because it's integrated well within the framework of the song without, you know, I don't know, catching you off guard and throwing you off in a bad way. You know, Killswitch was trying to throw you off by making stuff sound crazy before, but here they're making it sound very melodic and they're doing it in an interesting fashion while at the same time keeping it very cohesive, which is a word I always like to go back to. So good stuff right there. Quite a bit in the pre-chorus. Let's go ahead and talk about what Howard's vocals are doing now in the pre-chorus. And I'm going to go all the way back here to the very first start of the pre-chorus right here. Okay. So Howard's vocals. Okay, so I'm actually going to hide a few things so we can see what Howard's vocals are doing specifically in relation to the implied chords. And we're going to want this here. Okay, so you see the tab right here for the vocals, just in case you wanted to know how that sounded on guitar. We have the C minor, which is back over here. Okay, and the interval that it relates to based on C minor, in this case right here. And for this section, if it wasn't clear enough, sorry, I probably should have said something earlier. Right now, we are viewing these notes in relation to the implied chord, because I have the implied chord right up here. Just wanted to make that clear. So we have Howard's vocals, 5, 1, flat 7. So we start off very kind of dramatic sounding to go with the 5 right here as an interval in relation to C minor. Really kind of jumps out and punches you, which is really, I feel, something like what you want for this kind of bombastic type of chorus right here. And goes to the 1 of A flat. So hangs out on the 4 a while within B flat, and that's the flat 7. Then kind of, when it gets to the F minor, the 4, it kind of just slowly works its way down to the 1 of F minor. So kind of finishes out in unity with what the chord being implied over top is, if you would. Getting on to the next section. So in this section, we're back to the C minor again. We have some 1s, we have some Cs Howard's going with, then the 3, the flat 3. Basically, this whole passage is chord tone soloed. At the 4. Playing right here, the 4 of A flat, and this section right here, it's obviously not in the tab, but Howard and Adam D both screaming their balls off again, really, you know, and something about it really just smacks you. Like, I want to learn more about how to produce vocals in that fashion, because the vocals almost feel like a hit on a drum. It smacks you so hard, and it's great. So continuing on from there. Okay, so now we get into the B flat. So we have some 2s right here. Once again, using those 2s within the B flat, a 4. And then in the F minor, we have some 2s, some 7s. And then finally finishing on the 1 before going to the flat 7. No doubt to kind of give a little bit of a pull to something coming. You know, if you're on the 4, and that's what the F minor is here, it's already going to be pulling a little bit to the next thing. You know what I'm saying? It's not like you're on the 1 or the flat 3 or anything. It's going to pull you some, but I feel like going to the flat 7 there might give it just that little extra push and everything. It's like, well, you know, are the vocals going to go to the tonic of the chord being implied here? It's like they're not, and then the chord itself is pulling to something else too. So a very nice way to keep pulling without, you know, using a freaking natural 7 or something like that. So good stuff right there. And it's worth noting, I obviously didn't do it here. As I said, I just applied the motion concepts to what was going on in the octave guitars, but you could very, very easily integrate what's going on there and try to fit in Howard's vocal lines along with what's going on the octave guitars in standpoint of parallel motion, contrary motion, similar motion, and all of that stuff. Didn't do that here, but it is something that can be done. It's something worth keeping in mind if you're writing your own stuff like this. So I'm going to go ahead and play this through, and we're going to get to the chorus. This song might have the most beautiful chorus I've heard in my life. It's so perfect to me. So let's go ahead and start talking about it. So I'm going to start by just talking about what chords are implied here. As with many Killswitch songs and like a lot of empowering riffs in general, they start on the flat 6. They go up for a moment halfway through the second measure to the flat 7. They come to rest on the 1. They then work their way back through the flat 7 to the flat 6. And I'm going to play that through without talking. Right here, you see one thing Killswitch does quite often, which I feel is somewhat unique to them. Not entirely, but definitely they do it well, integrating some heaviness and insanity into a rather beautiful chorus line. Soilwork does this too very well on Momentary Bliss, actually, but you have some palm-muted passages here before jumping back to something that kind of pushes you forward to the next part of the chorus, so I'm going to go ahead and play that from a couple measures back. Okay, and then getting back into the crazy part. But yeah, so the entire lead line, or rather rhythmic line with the bass and the rhythm guitar, is just a movement from a flat 6, flat 7 down to kind of rest on the 1, then back through the flat 7 to the flat 6, and just repeating over and over again. Very simple, yet very nice. It's exactly what you need for a song like this. You know, it sounds beautiful, especially with what's going on over top of it. So first, let's talk about the guitar line first, okay? So that's right here. Okay, so the guitar line. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the intervals that's going on. Actually, first before that, very, very simple, once again, playing some dotted quarter notes right here, a little bit of variation within that. Once again, for a song like this, it's really all you need. If you're trying to get your guitars to sound like, I don't know if a wall is a proper way, but like maybe a wave of sound, a wave where everything kind of just gels and is unified together from a standpoint of music theory, notes like this are perfect. You know, like dotted quarter notes, half notes. They sound really, really well, and they work really, really well, rhythmically speaking. It's all you need. So let's get into some of the intervals being implied here. So right there, once again, we have a 2, so we have what is essentially a flat 6 with a 2 over top of it. Beautiful sounding interval extension to be put on top of an implied chord, moving to the 3, back to the 2, to the sharp 4, and the sharp 4 is always something that's like really kind of worth talking about. To me, a lot of the life in the songs that I love come from the Lydian mode, all right? So that's the flat 6. So when you're hitting a song hard in a minor key, especially if you have like chromaticism or you're switching up to Phrygian sometimes, if you want to really lift things up and give some major empowerment, go to the flat 6, all right? That's the Lydian chord, if you would. And if you want to really make it sound Lydian, you add a flat 4 in there. And what that does essentially in that kind of context is give you a sound. It pretty much gives you a sound like what Killswitch Engage has. I mean, to put it plainly, it's right here. This is the Killswitch Engage kind of sound. It's doing minor chords all the way up until a point where you get to a flat 6. That's the Killswitch Engage sound, and that really is sealed with the sharp 4. It gives it a sense of just empowerment and beauty. It can sound almost like ethereal in certain contexts if you use it a certain way. But here, it just really, really makes it sound great and beautiful. If you don't want to play it in a lead line, have your guitar in your rhythmic line play, instead of a power chord, play a 1 and a flat 4 instead, with the root being a Lydian note, a flat 6 note, whatever you want to call it, and that'll make it sound great. So continuing on. All right, so this part right here isn't a sharp 4 because it actually transitions to a flat 7, just so you know. And I'm actually going to do what I did before. I'm going to go ahead and hide some of this other stuff so we can get a really clear look at what's going on here. So we're going to at this point, we're at the 1, we're coming to rest on the C. Killswitch, once again, utilizing a 2 and a flat 7 at the same time as a chord tone with the flat 3. So just going all out to just add extension after extension, and it sounds beautiful, man. Like, this is the sound of beauty in metal. It's the utilization of extensions, all right? It's the flat 7s, the sharp 4s, the 2s. That's how you get that sound, and it's a great thing to hear. So we then move to the flat 7, back to the flat 6. Using the flat sharp 4 once again, rather. The sharp 4 right here. And it's such a subtle thing right here, but I gotta say, I really, really love how right here, right just a moment after the chord plays, you have this note right here. Going on, giving some tension right there with the flat 7, with this note right here, just kind of kicking it over the edge and pulling it a little more even over into the next part of the chorus. So this part of the chorus is the same. I didn't annotate a certain part of it. So the lead line is actually exactly the same there, but let's get into what Howard's vocals are doing. And I gotta say, this song is a wonderful, incredible song without the vocals, but Howard's vocals is really what elevates it to just an entirely different level, you know what I'm saying? So let's go ahead and take a look at what's happening here. All right, so we're gonna move back a little bit more. Here we are. Okay. We have Howard doing some kind of following the chord tones right here for this section. We then get to a point where we have Adam D harmonize with him. That's what these lower lines right here. I have them noted out respectively here as well. You know, once again, within C minor, you have the 2s, the ever-present 2s going on here, really making things sound beautiful. Like, that's what I call 2s, man. I feel like as extensions, they typically sound really beautiful. Flat 2s can sound dissonant as shit, but the regular 2s, man, in the proper context, they can sound great. Okay, so we go back again, a lot of extensions. Right here, ending on what is the 6 at the moment when a B flat is playing, but becoming the 5 as soon as the C minor plays. And it's worth pointing out too, you know, we have a lot of movements right here where like the note that gets hit, the note that gets sung is playing just an instant, or in this case, a beat before the following chord. So just, you know, kind of little techniques sprinkled like that all around here. Three to a 7 to a 6, another 2. Ending on the 5 of C minor. Okay, so then finishing out before it abruptly grabs you by the fucking collar and throws you right back into the really fucking dissonant part. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on here. So first of all, just a little tiny production thing I noticed. I feel like there is a little bit of an EQ sweep as the cymbals play right here, in order to just kind of really kind of fully transition you in. Just a little flare thing you wouldn't even notice. I only noticed it like just literally now, and I've been listening to this song for a decade. But just a little touch in there, just something cool. So this whole little section right here, it's basically a 3-measure transition utilizing timing of 2/4 right here. It really just kind of reinforces this extreme dichotomy that Killswitch is known for, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like in plenty of melodic death metal, there is a little bit more of an even spacing of elements. Like, choruses can be very beautiful, verses can be very crushing, but there's a lot of kind of melody kind of sprinkled throughout and a lot of intensity sprinkled throughout, whereas with Killswitch Engage, they go full on 100% intensity and craziness and dissonance at some points, and full on beauty and harmony and melody at other points. And it was, I actually knew a guy, I showed him, it might have been this song right here, in fact, I forget which one it was, but he described it as, you know, yeah, you know, it feels like, you know, when the heavy part's going, like you're in hell, then when the chorus comes, you rise up to heaven. Like, it is that much of a dichotomy, and doing things like just cutting all that nice sounding stuff out to that really kind of grindy chromatic stuff with the weird like 2/4 rest right here. before using more kind of non-diatonic stuff. I mean, that is the dichotomy of Killswitch Engage. That is how you do it right there. You know, and if you're just playing on a guitar even, you find out pretty quick that to get really intense, crushing sounding stuff, you make sure to play chromatically. You play in half steps and everything like that. This is just a kind of, call it a nice reaffirmation of what's going on here with that. In a standpoint of music theory, if you wanted to do the opposite, where you wanted to kind of come up with something from a songwriting perspective, say without your instrument, you'd do something like this. You'd use a lot of chromaticism in there. So yeah. Drums here too are very, very simplistic as well. Almost gives it kind of a feeling of a breakdown like we discussed before. Not too much else to talk about here because a lot of it, or mostly all of it's a repeat from the first time, so I'm just going to play it on through. This as well is pretty much identical to what it was before, so we're just going to play it on through. Again, same kind of stuff going on here. I'm checking to see if there's anything. It's all kind of the same thing, you know. Keep in mind the extensions. We have the 2s, we have the sharp 4s. We have all this stuff going in here to make it sound very, very beautiful. Okay. So we then get into more definitively what you could call a breakdown. A quick side note, you know, Killswitch Engage is interesting. I feel like breakdown, when I think of breakdowns, I used to think of bands like, you know, A Day to Remember or something like that. I feel like Killswitch has breakdowns too. They're definitely different, and I like them because there is quite a bit of, I don't want to say complexity like they're super freaking complex or anything like that, but they are slightly more intricate, and I like that nuance with it. They really kind of get a full range of heavy sounds, if you would, from them in situations like this, so it's pretty tight. So let's go ahead and play it. That's the bass. Okay, so before getting into it entirely, in its entire fashion, I'm going to interpret this section as a bimodal shift to C Phrygian, okay? And the reason for that being is this right here. That should actually say a flat 2. All right, so we have a lot of 1. Again, if we're still looking at this from C minor, we now have a flat 2, which is not in C minor. A flat 2 is in C Phrygian. So I'm going to view this as such from there. Okay, and that's just the bass you heard right there. Okay, so we're utilizing also some chromaticism, some natural 3s. So once again, it's not a perfect showing that this is like C Phrygian. I'm calling it C Phrygian because essentially what you have when you look at it this way is less flats to deal with. And that might not be the best way to look at it, but if you want intensity more so than a minor scale, you're going to go with a Phrygian scale, okay? So even though there's stuff going on here outside of just a Phrygian like the natural 3, I'm trying to get as close as I can to be able to describe the sounds you're hearing. And one descriptor of that is Phrygian because you have the flat 2 in there, and that's a very intense sounding interval. So let's go. We're going into this part. We had a pick slide and everything. Using some very heavy chromaticism right here, you know. So we have basically chromatic movements. We have the 1s right here. Okay, so this part's a little bit weird right here to me. So, you know, it looks to me like it kind of momentarily just goes back to regular old C minor. The bass is noted right here as doing something kind of like odd and bizarre to me. Maybe someone else could explain that, but overall, I would describe this as quickly just kind of returning in a fashion to C minor. So within the heaviness and the breakdown, you have a quick reprieve to something that's still kind of intense and heavy. It's a minor chord, it's a minor implication, but a little bit less intense and heavy and crazy than this sort of Phrygian Locrian thing we have going on. My computer's fucking lagging, sorry about that. Okay. Now, as they transition here, they add some cymbal and everything just to make it a little more intense. Just wanted to quickly point out some of the intervals being used here as well in case it might be useful to you. I saw a moment ago they're utilizing some other things like a E flat right here. Going back to the minor. This part all kind of repeats from what we just heard a moment ago. Just again, to kind of sum it up, lots of chromaticism, lots of weird things right here. You know, we have what essentially is like a minor chord nested within this stuff right here. You know, not 100% sure these tabs are totally accurate. But my point is, there is lots of techniques you can utilize in order to make stuff sound heavy. Nesting chromaticism within things, throwing in accidentals to make things sound heavy. Imply something like quickly from, you know, a Phrygian or Locrian scale. I mean, that's also a great thing to do to build tons of intensity very, very quickly. You know, you'll get some intensity quickly from it, and you'll get some just insanity from it as well. I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. Okay, so then it goes back. So here we go. Okay, so then jumps right back to the C minor scale with the flat 4 and the flat 7. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here a little bit so we can see the whole thing. Okay. So quickly, just kind of from a production angle, to cut everything out from a part that intense before building that sort of, shall we say, diatonic tension with the flat 6 and the flat 7, to cut everything out completely and then just let the vocals come in, almost kind of slightly just kind of push their way in. Really is a perfect build-up to the remainder of this chorus and the perfect build-up to the beauty that you're about to hear in this chorus. So very good stuff there. Also wanted to point out, just thought it was kind of interesting, what you hear when everything cuts out except for the crash, I believe, is you actually hear them muting their guitars with their hands. So a tiny little element, just, you know, interesting use of sound in order to lend to the transition. They didn't cut the sound out entirely. They didn't put a chord strike there. They actually left the sound of them muting their guitar strings right here. And the tab actually shows that these X's right here are like mutations. Them muting their guitar strings, and it shows it there, and that's just kind of a cool little stylistic choice. The guitar does go during that rest as well. All right, so let me go back a little bit. Just want to make sure. Now, there is vocal variation going on here, which is a really cool thing. There is, on occasion, if you ever record your own music, all right, and you loop a passage over and over again, I mean the same passage, like the exact same recording, you will start to pick out things in it that sound very, very, you know, repetitious, obviously, but it kind of starts to catch your ear off guard in a certain way. It kind of starts to catch your ear in a bad way, like saying, like, oh man, this is just looped. It sounds just very robotic and machine-like, which is what you're doing because you're looping the same thing over again. So you can do different takes of the same riff, but a thing to do even better in some situations is to go ahead and have your line change entirely. And it can be subtle changes, but what we're going to observe here, right here in the vocals, right here, is they're changed entirely, which is once again just a great stylistic choice in order to keep things sounding interesting. Vocal line is right here. Everything else here, theory, is what we talked about before. Okay, so now it gets into a really, really cool part right here. So, you know, from a theoretical perspective, if I'm not mistaken, everything stays pretty much the same here. More so what happens, or the same that is for the guitars. The more so thing that happens here is that the vocals change a little bit, as well as, and I'm not sure about this, but I feel like there is another guitar added somewhere. That's not to say it's doing something different, but I feel like potentially there's a guitar coming at me like down the middle, or maybe the guitars are turned up somewhere. Point is, it's essentially like the same lines, it's the same riffs or whatever, but something is done in the production to make it different, which is a really cool thing to do. You know, I feel like from lots of music, and I mean, I'm sure it still happens, but I feel like around this time, this album came out like 2004-ish, 2005, I forget the exact year it came out, but around this time, I feel like a really great thing to do to get more life out of a chorus was to change up something subtly like that. We actually observed it too with 2 Weeks by All That Remains. That album came out in about 2008, I believe. We observed that in the final chorus, there was a change in the lead guitar lines. They were panned differently. They sunk away as a vocal line came up, just ever so subtly, you know, and especially, and I mean, I didn't hear this stuff for like a decade, you know? So especially if you're just like a casual listener of this kind of music, by casual, I mean like maybe you don't study recording or music theory or play guitar or anything, you're not going to hear what's going on at all, really, unless you have really good ears, but you're definitely going to feel it. So that was something, that's just a great technique, because it's not necessarily terribly hard to do either. You know, you don't have to like bring the person back like, hey, you know, the final chorus is boring, I need you to come up with a new line for it. No, you take what you've done, what you already have, you move it somewhere else. Maybe you elevate the volume, maybe you change something about it in order to make it sound fuller and better. And I'm definitely not a production guy, not yet, but I can tell you that in this song anyways, that technique is utilized, and it's something that was done to great effect in order to get an even better sound from what you're hearing and carry on the chorus along with different vocals, and as well as that, a different drum line. All right, so to go back really quick, again, the drums change up. The drums, like throughout all the choruses at this point, have had a lot of kind of almost like reserved sounding qualities to them, but at this point, they really kind of, they pick up in pep, if you would, along with Howard just belting it out, man. Like just one of my... Like that line right there, man, when Howard, right here, when Howard belts it out like that, he moves up from this 1 to this flat 7 to the 6. I mean, it sounds freaking perfect, man. It's so great. At this passage, there's a line where they scream as well along with it. So again, adding some variation, adding some different screams right here. If we continue on. These lead lines are as they were before. Okay, so want to go back really quick to look at something in the chorus really quick, and if we see, again, it's a very subtle thing. It's very subtle, but if we look here, you know, that kind of percussive element right here with the guitars. The drums are also doing some more intense stuff, and it really just makes the final chorus, because they're basically repeating the chorus here an extra time. You want to make sure no one gets tired of it. You want to make this the big, like, bombastic conclusion to things and everything, and to just change up little things like the drum line there in this particular section with that fill, add more to it, and it sounds so great, man. All right, so then as well, we have a little bit of a different sung little clean line right here, along with some screams. If I'm not mistaken, you also hear Adam D's voice come in there. I want to double check that. And it sounds great because while this E is going right here, you have a C minor, so it basically ends on the flat 3. And, you know, talking about kind of the C chord is this thing that you can kind of come to rest at or whatever, like, you know, to chill out at, to kind of feel like you've come back home or whatever. It does it perfectly there. From Howard going to this, what would be, it's not labeled there, but it'd be a flat 3 on this C minor chord. It closes things out vocally. Absolute perfection, man. This song might have my favorite vocals in it ever. It's definitely a hot contender for that, if not the song that has my favorite vocals in ever. So let's go ahead and listen to the very last measures. Then also, I feel very common from like kind of 2000s time frame metal key changes. Not to say key changes aren't used in other places, but a slowly changing, and I did my best here to figure out what it was, you know, just kind of by ear. It's off, but slowly kind of lowering the tempo, so you have a lot of like just final moments, I guess milliseconds and everything before it finally hits that final chord, and you're feeling good. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, utilizing techniques like that are great if you want to just, again, they're little things. They're great if you want to just add that little extra flair to elevate your song, because when you take elements like this key change right here, like this is, I'd call this key change right here a single element, okay? When you take an element like that and add it with another element like the vocal change right here, and some other elements we saw earlier back, like with the guitar, being panned down the center and everything like that, or any key changes or time signature changes, when you have, like, I don't know, 20 or however many elements throughout the course of an entire song, you get something really special at the end of the day. You have a song full of that, and they don't just, at that point, they don't become elements. They don't become small little things you did to make it sound extra cool. They become like, the fabric of the song. They become something like inseparable from the song, and it elevates the song overall. So yeah, really, really good stuff right here. This is without a doubt one of my favorite Killswitch songs. This song, End of Heartache, In Due Time. In Due Time is another hot one, but that song is so different. It's very different. It's hard to kind of even compare it to this in some ways. Eye of the Storm is also a really good one. Those are kind of the top songs that, for me, make Killswitch who they are. They have tons and tons of other great songs, but those are the big ones for me. This song, I feel, kind of has its unique and special place within everything, because unlike End of Heartache, which has beautiful passages in it, however, unlike it, this song has crazy, crazy, intense, and fast elements in it too. Along with that, In Due Time is very different, and Eye of the Storm is probably the song that's closest to this in terms of, like, very, very intense parts with very, very beautiful parts. I do feel like this song does it best in a lot of ways, though, so it's a very, very great song. It's the perfect song, I feel, to try to look at, to try to understand if you want to get that sort of mid-2000s beautiful metalcore sound in the style of Killswitch Engage. Metalcore is a very, there's lots of bands in metalcore that sound very different than Killswitch Engage, but this, I feel, is something very worth studying if you want to get that sound. This, I feel, is the blueprint for lots of songs that I like. Not to say that bands listen to the song and straight up copied it, but at the very least, there's lots of commonality between what techniques are being used and such like that. So very, very awesome song to look at. Guys, I appreciate you checking out this video. If you could do me a big favor, man, I released a song a while ago on Spotify. It's called Celestial Fray. You can find it on there at spikes.signal. You can also find it right here on YouTube if you rather. I'd appreciate it if you could check it out and let me know what you think of it. If you think it sucks, tell me it sucks, man. That's all good, dude. I want some people to check it out and listen to it, man, But if you like this, I have more sheet music analysis and other things coming, so if you're interested, keep it right here at the Spike Signal. Thank you.